So this is a special episode, isn't it? We've never done this before. It's the first time we tried this new format. And yeah, Eva, do you want to briefly say what do we do here?
So what we wanted to do was have some special episodes with CDR buyers and ask questions from the policy perspective, because it's not often that we hear that specifically coming up. And we thought if we interview some thought leaders in the space, we might get some really tangible takeaways that could inform policymakers and kind of point out the obvious gaps also that we currently have.
And I guess what's quite special about this one is we actually did it in person, which is rare for the Policy Scoop. But both you and I happened to be at Carbon Unbound Europe in October 21st and 22nd in London. And we figured there were a bunch of buyers there. We reached out, and thankfully quite a few of them agreed to talk to us. And so, yeah, this is what this special episode is all about.
There is a lot happening to some extent in this space, but also, as many say, not enough. Do you have some stats to get us started?
Yes, and I mean, all credit goes to CDR.fyi, but a couple of things that are quite interesting. 686 companies have made a purchase to date. Of these 686, only around 100 bought more than 1,000 tons. Only around 51 companies, more than 10,000 tons. 17 bought more than 100,000, and only 2 bought more than a megaton. And those 2 are Frontier and, of course, Microsoft leading the way at 31 megatons. The big theme that I see looking through the data from CDR.fyi is that purchases overall keep going up with and without Microsoft, but the number of unique purchases seems to be plateauing. And that is why one of the biggest challenges the sector probably faces is how to get new buyers into the space. And I guess from our perspective, we really want to know what role policy can play in that.
Yeah, that is a challenge. And the first interviewee to get us started is Robert Höglund. He is the co-founder of CDR.fyi, the source of all the data. And he's also the manager of Milkywire Climate Transformation Fund. So let's listen to what he has to say about the needs of the buyers.
Let's talk a bit about the buyer's perspective. There have been quite a few initiatives in the voluntary carbon markets on improving its integrity. Obviously, the VCMI and ICVCM, like from different angles. To some extent, also SBTi through its work. What do you think in there is working or not working when it comes to CDR?
To me, that doesn't have anything to do with CDR.
Really?
That's been about traditional carbon credits, like hardly at all. Like durable CDR is also the answer in a way to like the quality problems that they had, right? That's their thing that they're doing. And I'm sure it's improving quality of traditional credits, but it's not something that the durable CDR industry is really involved in.
But in a way, the durable CDR standards also then we need to align themselves to fit into those rule sets, right?
Sure. Yeah. In the Paris Agreement, in the Article 6.4, like there they, I think, go into each other a bit, but I don't see that much kind of direct involvement in it. But perhaps it can, for new buyers, if you have these core carbon principles, that kind of things, if you have that endorsement, could maybe make it even easier to, or not even easier, make it easier to commit to buying.
Do you see any negative aspects? Like if you talk about these initiatives that as they don't really think about engineered removals, maybe sometimes they're not really fit to be applied on engineered removals that well, or like it's really not part of their thinking as they go through their initiatives.
That's possible. I haven't engaged that deeply in order to find that.
Yeah, because indeed there are some things that I've noticed that are could potentially be an issue. So if you think about CDR credits and we want to make them more investable for buyers, what kind of standardization or policy clarity would help make the credits more investable?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that's the problem right now. Like the lack of standardization.
Is it the demand?
Yeah, like it's it wouldn't make that much of a difference, I think. Like if there's demand for CDR and people want to use it, then we figure out like the rest figures itself out, I think. Maybe things like CRCF in the EU can help a cautious company, like, oh, it's CRCF certified, then I dare to buy. But I think the fundamental issue is that companies don't have like a good reason to buy. It's not that it's not standardized and the quality is there as well.
Yeah, and in this interviews with buyers, this is what I keep hearing when I ask what kind of policy they will be asking for or looking for as buyers.
Yeah.
To help scale CDR as something that creates predictable demand, keeps popping up first. Like I'd like to go deeper into demand. Is there anything else where you think policy could help? Where we don't have something yet, or we have to a certain level, but we should have more.
Well, I think buyers clubs actually could help, like and the EU or the US actually being a buyer themselves. Yeah. Like if they go ahead and say we purchase from these, then you sort of de-risk it. EU Commission says this is a good thing, like and put their name behind it and bought from it. That could help a little bit, and then others could tag along. But there has to be real money from the policy side actually purchasing, not just subsidies, carrots, and so on. So acting as buyers themselves on the policy side could help unlock a bit more the demand, perhaps. Other than that, I think there are things in the soft policy, SBTi, of course, recommending CDR and being clear that you should do it, but I don't think we can expect too much from that after engaging for several years. I don't think it tipped any scales. So to me, it's more about like shifting the whole zeitgeist and cultural momentum and making it more like a thing that you do is to buy carbon removal. Like that's what everyone else is doing. It's something that's expected of you. And policy can help in shifting that window as well when decision makers go out and kind of make statements. Why does change even happen in the first place? Like why did all these companies set net zero targets, for example? Like it's not for structural, fundamental reasons because it's profitable or so on. It's because like it's vibes. It's because like the other companies were doing it and their investors were asking for it, and it just became the thing that you do. Like we need to shift that as well, which is really hard because now we are in a downturn of the vibes. They're a bit negative now, and it's not just CDR. It's other things in climate as well.
But it's also different because net zero targets. It felt like we just take on a target. You don't really feel it today, but you sign up for something in the future. Yeah. Whereas if you talk about buying CDR, you need to give money away today. This is not something that you do, or maybe you give the money away and you don't even get credits in the next 8 or 10 years, depending on what kind of pre-purchasing or offtake you're doing. So it's more difficult sell.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I would like to see more of as companies reaching a near-term net zero. Mm-hmm. And that's a way to actually have some demand so that they can claim something. Could be operational net zero, scope 1, 2, and business travel. So that at least they can say that they reached it 2030 or something like that and buying carbon removal for it.
Where could that come from, that kind of push that they could consider this kind of things?
I think it's been disincentivized by various actors that, net zero is something you do later. That's 2050. Like companies that had 2030 targets are pushing them to 2050 because of SBTi. Like, because that's the thing that you do. You're not supposed to reach near-term net zero, sort of, right? Yeah. Because, God forbid, you use CDR instead of emission reductions, kind of thing. So we need that conversation we need to have as well, that it's actually okay if you use durable CDR to reach the near-term net zero target as well.
So near-term net zero targets, is that a term that you have coined?
Yeah, but it's not like, I don't want it to be a term. It's just a descriptive thing, right?
Yeah, but it's becoming a thing now.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, I keep talking about it now. I mean, I don't think it's optimal necessarily, because the optimal thing would be you tax yourself and you spend it on wherever the money is needed without making claims. That would be optimal, but I realize that's not super popular. Yeah. So a lot of companies need to be able to make some kind of claim and have their investments count against their targets. And therefore, I think that something that keeps the integrity is this. And it also creates a massive, actually, incentive to reduce emissions. Because if you have emission reductions that are cheaper than durable carbon removal, like, you're going to want to do them. So you don't have to pay as much for carbon removal.
Yeah. There are two things I want to come back to. One is governments buying CDR credits themselves. Yeah. So in the EU context, what we have had discussed, that you also, I think, were at the workshop where the European Commission was talking about the pre-purchasing program. I mean, it's really, I mean, there has been quite a bit of work done around it, but the reality is that we don't really know what the numbers will look like. And that's, like, I was saying, the numbers and the scope really defines the potential impacts.
Yeah.
If you think about the numbers, what do you think they should be, so that the EU will, like, because imagine the EU just says, like, you know, here is 1 million euros.
Yeah, I mean, Frontier, which is a private thing, is 1 billion.
Yeah.
Right? That's companies doing it by themselves. So the EU should be bigger than this private small initiative.
Okay, at least a billion.
At least €1 billion done.
To have solid impacts. And when we talk about the policy tools that would create that demand, that would put that requirement on companies to buy CDR, how should it look like? How much CDR should companies be buying? Like, how would you approach it? Like, what would be this optimal policy signal that should come?
I don't think that policy will force companies to buy CDR, like, anywhere at any point, really. Like, it will be in ETSs, or as either to avoid paying a carbon tax, or because it's integrated into an ETS. That would be the way that you would do it. And then you would buy CDR where it's the cheapest option.
Okay, yeah, you really believe that CDR should not be linked to residual emissions, that it should be really...
it would be by automatically then, because residual emissions is whatever is left. That, to me, it's tautological. Like, residual emissions is where CDR is the cheapest.
I think there are people who are afraid that is not the case. And
well, it's more a definitional thing, what you think it should be, right? How you choose to define it. Okay. They may think it's a bad idea. Like... that discussion we can have. Yeah.
So I understand that the biggest challenge for buyers today is, or for scaling the market today, is the demand. But as a buyer, like, if you're looking at doing due diligence on different projects, like, what are the couple of key things that's, like, you see as an issue today, like, that comes up that you think should be tackled with more projects already, you know, upfront? To make it easier for buyers.
Right. I mean, it helps with all the work that's been done on methodologies and ratings, and that it's helpful for some buyers. I mean, that it gets de-risked, and you can find the information, and things like that. For new buyers, I can see being helpful. That you get some kind of stamp of approval by a third party, like, that's been checked and vetted. But ultimately, like, if you're on a registry that's credible, your credits should be credible, and you don't have to do any due diligence. It's just because we're so early that buyers feel that they have to be doing that. Ultimately, you shouldn't. If it's an issued ton on this trusted registry, I should be able to trust it.
Is that how you approach it as a buyer?
Not yet, but and we also don't just look for high quality tons, right? Milkywire tries to optimize for like how we can catalyze the market as much as possible. Do they really need the money? Like, is this an innovative pathway? So we look at the other things. Yeah, but for quality, it should be.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Robert. It has been a pleasure hearing your take on this as a buyer.
Thank you. Yeah.
And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, I will.
So what jumps out to me, and we recorded an episode with Robert literally yesterday, which folks can go and listen to, about the EU's Buyers Club. And he also mentioned that there is this concept of near-term net zero. And this is something that he seems to be kind of putting emphasis on as something that could really help us spur demand in the short term, which is really where we need it most, right? But yeah, curious, Eve, do you agree? What stood out to you?
Well, I think he's been doing a great job advocating for the near-term net zero and also operational net zero, like these two concepts he keeps putting out there. Something that is important to point out is that we recorded these interviews before the second version of the SBTi draft standards, draft net zero standard was published for the next round of public feedback. So all of this here is in this expectation that maybe something will come out of the SBTi or not. In practice, we know already what it actually delivered. I think it was super interesting to hear what is the actual scale of funding he would like to see from the potential EU Buyers Club, for example, because we recorded another episode with him on this later after this interview, but before we are releasing it. And saying that the EU should spend at least $1 billion of public money is a strong message right there.
I agree. But yeah, fascinating insights as always from Robert. And next up, we have Lamé Verre, the Sustainability Director for Net Zero at the Crown Estate. And for me, this was interesting because the Crown Estate was not a buyer I had come across personally previously in my journey in the CDR space. So I was really curious how a pretty peculiar entity, if we think about it, is now really stepping into the CDR space. Let's see what she had to say.
Thanks for being here.
The
Crown Estate is a name that I didn't encounter before in our space. I was very glad that you're now also doing great work here. Can you tell us a little bit, how's the Crown Estate approaching carbon removals?
So I think for us, carbon removal as a market is something that we view as we have to look at it as a value chain and the role we can play in that value chain. Because one of the big challenge with CDR is the bankability of projects. And so our view is that if we can convey all the stakeholders and all the participants in the value chain, so we own the land, you get the developer, you unlock the financing, you get the offtake, and line that up at the very beginning, then the bankability of the projects will unlock, and then that way we can enable the nascent market because it's still very young and unknown, and so still kind of like an emerging sector. But we know for a fact that we have to have some CDR within the net zero budget plan to be able to get to zero, and so we also have to account for previous emissions before we kind of really get there. So there is the wider conversation around the ecosystem in building the marketplace and getting that marketplace lined up with all the players from the beginning rather than having it as a patchwork.
It's quite interesting. It's quite an unusual position because you're covering end-to-end the whole ecosystem.
Hoping to cover it end-to-end. So that's kind of what we've been working on. So in February, we went to our board or our sustainability committee, which is a subset of the board, with the plan of our thinking and approach for what we would like to do with CDR. And then since September, we've now actually been working in developing that feasibility plan, because one of the other things is it's not just good enough to have a plan, it has to be a plan that you can deliver. So what's the business model around the plan? What's the commercial model? Who are the players and the stakeholders that you need to line up for the value chain? And so we are now kind of working with experts in the sector to kind of really get our head around it so that we can try to have at least 1 or 2 projects in being live soon. So.
And what kind of, as you select projects, as you select partners in the space to work with, what bottlenecks are you still encountering? Where do you see still gaps that surprised you?
So I think the big gap that we're seeing or hearing is, who's going to buy the offtake, right? So you don't have a line of buyers waiting to take it because the ones that are available are already being souped up by the tech companies. So the tech bros have taken the existing credits, and then you have the land use competition between food production and what you kind of do with CDR, but you also have to do nature recovery. So you're planting trees and hedgerows and peatland restoration. So there is the competing need for land to do sequestration, and you've got to then prioritize. So, but what we're hearing, especially for what we used to call hard to abate, but I think you guys call it hard to ignore sectors, they're going to need those credits. So our thinking of carbon dioxide removal is not actually to create a credit for us to use, but to contribute to the wider UK net zero. So we're going to do our role in terms of decarbonizing our business, but also contributing to the UK net zero. And so we kind of look at this more as a long-term view rather than we need to do something in the next quarter, because it's a bigger plan, and how you bring that together with the different stakeholders, because everyone is going to have different agendas. But what we're also seeing, actually, which is very interesting, is the investment houses are looking to buy more credit these days to offset their own operations, because a lot of their costs in terms of carbon or emissions is in their employees. So they are looking to buy credits for those expenditure on travel and stuff like that. So beyond the tech world, I think, the investment houses, the insurance houses, those kind of people, and they have deep pockets, right? So hopefully we can line that part of the financing. So if HSBC, picking on HSBC because he was in the audience, but jokes apart, is you've got to find patient capital for this kind of project, right? It's not a project that is going to return double digits in 3 to 5 years. It might be a longer runway, so you need a different kind of capital to bank it. So it's finding that patient capital, finding the willing players, and then making your project plan accordingly. And you can also think about it in modular phases. So rather than going straight to a gigaton, as the banner on stage says, you might want to do them in modular fashion, right? Or mobile fashion, but still delivering the credit and delivering the sequestration that you need. So we have to be creative in how we do these things. We are building this plane as we're flying, as they say.
Yeah.
So, but it's really interesting time. I think, the amount of carbon conferences and summits that are coming up the last few years, you can tell that the interest in the space is increasing. And yes, I think, it's just a fascinating time to be doing the job that I'm doing now. And, so let's see. Maybe next year I can actually point you to a project. So hold me accountable to that, making a promise online. So you may scratch that out. So I've just set myself up. Yeah, but yeah.
We'll talk again in a year about this.
Yeah.
I mean, here, especially at the Policy Scoop, we cover a lot of carbon removal policy. And so thinking about all the things that need to happen that you just described, what type of policy do you think governments in UK, but also elsewhere in general, should need to enact?
I think the thing about carbon is for so long, it's kind of stayed in this voluntary market space. It's kind of like something you do out of the goodness of your heart. But the market doesn't really work like that. The invisible hand doesn't work like that. You've got to price it and fix the price, so then the businesses can make the investment decisions around the project. The other bit is that it's quite fragmented, so there's no standardization. You know what a dollar means and what a pound means. A unit of carbon means different things in different geographies. So standardizing that whole concept also would help. And then also the transparency. This is where technology will be a great enabler in terms of putting the data and the trust of the data in a kind of open source or data exchange, so that people can trust what they're buying. And when you retire it, you're not double counting. So there are a few things which I think are kind of foundational elements that just need to be in place. So the right policy, the right pricing, standardization, data exchange, and building it like the way we build the financial services, right? We've got stock exchange for financial markets, so we need some kind of exchange for carbon markets, and then you regulate it, and then you hands off and let the private sector do what it knows how to do best.
Sounds excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much. And
all in a day's job, they say, but it's easy peasy. Now, but jokes apart, I think it's a very exciting market. There is a lot of opportunity. Whilst it covers, 10% of what you need to do to get to zero, but it's still an important part for the sectors that are really going to find it very hard. And so people investing in it should be lining up. I was at a Carbon CCS conference back last May, and I asked the question, where are the customers? You've got all the technology and all the providers, and there was no customer in the room. You need the cement guy, you need the steel guy, you need all the sectors that are struggling. They are the customers. They are the ones that are going to be able to send CO2 offshore to sequestrate. They are the ones that will want to buy terrestrial credit. So we need to be, engaging with the wider sector beyond our kind of small ecosystem where we're used to operating. So it's an exciting time.
Thank you, Lamé.
So, Sebastian, what do you think?
I mean, the Crown Estate is a really interesting entity, right? They have a ton of land. And also they own a lot of like a lot of companies that we probably are not even familiar with. And so their approach is really holistic, right? They're not just thinking, oh, we're going to buy some CDR credits and we're going to use them to compensate our emissions. No, they're really thinking, how can we fill a space that maybe others are not? How can we use credits, but also create credits? How can we leverage our land to support the growth of CDR? So for me, their approach was very different from what I know, especially from the big tech companies, right? But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, the mindset of it's not just being the buyer and project developer, but also thinking like, what can we do to help the UK achieve its net zero targets? Very different, big mindset. I'm so happy that we were able to hear her perspective, and I'm also very happy that she promised to be back potentially in a year to tell us how it's going. Right, a hook right there.
What's also interesting with her, how she said the tech bros already took the entire supply. I hadn't heard that like this before, but that was really insightful, that a buyer is actually saying, look, there's a supply crunch. And because of that, we need to get more creative in terms of where the CDR is coming from.
Yeah, indeed. But now on to a different perspective. We have Chris Minter, who is the head of supply chain sustainability at Zurich Insurance Group, and it's really interesting to hear a very, very streamlined approach for like how buying should be built and what are the main asks out there for companies like that.
Chris, what I would like to know is what makes CDR procurement feasible or difficult in a company like Zurich Insurance Group?
Okay, so it's only feasible because we have a climate transition plan with net zero goals for our own operations by 2030. And as part of our scenario planning, it was inevitable to us that we could not reach net zero without carbon removal, because we're always going to have some level of residual emission. Despite reducing business travel, electrifying our fleet of vehicles, adopting renewable energies, we will always have some form of residual emissions. And therefore, we need to look to carbon removal to support us with that.
So it's an easy sell basically within the organization. But is there a level or a limitation how much you're actually looking to procure?
Well, we have an internal carbon price, which provides us with an annual budget to be able to execute contracts and source CDR. The majority of our contracts so far have been pre-purchase agreements with pretty early stage companies. We started off in 2022 with our first contracts, all enabled by our internal carbon price, on the basis that we were sourcing future CDR capacity today, or in prior years as well, for future usage. And our basic principle is that we're aiming to increase the amount of CDR we use every year up until 2030, at which point our operational emissions will be fully neutralized with CDR.
And so if you're increasing it every year, like how steep is the curve between, let's say, now and 2030?
So it's balanced. It's a gradual step-by-step increase, because we've been buying traditional avoided deforestation type carbon credits since 2014. So we plan to continue to do that because we think the projects still have a place. If companies aren't buying these credits, then there's no business case any longer to safeguard and protect these natural ecosystems that have massive amounts of CO2 sequestration ability. So we'll be reducing the amount of offsets we buy, but increasing the amount of CDR that we buy. And I guess in terms of a framework or a standard, we kind of align to the Oxford offsetting principles, in that the amount of removal, but also the durability of the removal, should increase each and every year back to our target carbon price.
And now when you're looking to procure these credits, or basically put these agreements in place, and you're doing this due diligence, like what is making it easy or challenging for you? Because by now you have quite some experience, given that you started back in 2022, right?
Yep, we've definitely learned from doing. The due diligence is an onerous activity, and I think you really need to understand the entire value chain of the carbon project, from right where it starts to its completion point, but also all of its interactions along the way. Because our due diligence has found so far that there is no such thing as the perfect project. All of them involve some kind of compromise along the way. So perhaps biochar is a scalable carbon removal method right now, but you could criticize some case sustainability of some of the feedstocks. Direct air capture is pretty easy to monitor, but it's capital intensive, it requires energy. So none of these solutions on their own are perfect. And that's what we've found through our due diligence is we need to understand the full systems thinking life cycle and manage the risk accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Now, when I'm listening to precision biochar, director capture, the price points of these are actually quite different. How do you allocate your budget across different price points when it comes to procuring CDR? Do you have it already in mind when you start looking for new projects, or?
Yeah, we do. We have a projection already as to what our future emissions will be. We have a preferred trajectory as to how much removal and each of the different solutions that we have. We've got prices already and locked in contracts. So the pre-purchase agreements that we've signed, most of them will deliver us credits in the future, but also we've locked in options to buy additional credits, assuming economies of scale and improved pricing on the supply side. So yes, we have target prices for each of the year. We've built a model which can help us plan for the future, and basically now we're executing against that.
Yeah, sounds like a great plan. You're secured already the supply, but you also have this flexibility of getting what rates as you need.
Yes.
So at the CDR Policy Scope, we are mostly looking at the CDR policy. And so we feel like one of the topics that hasn't been discussed that much, especially with buyers, is what kind of policy would they want to see, right? What would be helpful for you when you look at either the existing policy landscape, what is already there, or maybe what is missing and what you would wish could be there?
Mm-hmm. I guess the thing that's missing at the moment is a mandate for corporate companies to purchase CDR, but the purchasing of CDR will not come until you're mandated to have a net zero transition plan.
Yeah.
So transition plan is first, then mandating of buying CDR, but we're quite some distance. From that. We do have the corporate sustainability due diligence directive in Europe that requires the largest companies to have a transition plan, but that, along with the CSRD, the reporting directive, is being reviewed at the moment and will likely be substantially changed. So from a corporate perspective, the mandate to set targets, but also to buy CDR is probably the part that's missing.
Okay, that's very clear. Well, thank you for taking the time. It has been great to learn what matters from your perspective. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Eva.
Well, I think Chris had a very clear message here that the mandate to set targets and buy CDR is missing, and we really, really need that mandate. And that's something that keeps popping up, and we've been brainstorming on the same question in the EU context with Robert in our episode on EU Buyers Club. And it's a tricky one to solve, right?
But what really stood out to me from Chris was how you said streamlined earlier, but really how systematic they are in their approach, right? I mean, it might be, the Swiss approach, Swiss company, but they're really thinking about it. Here's the target. Here's how we're going to get the target. We know that we currently rely, for example, heavily on nature-based, but this is how we transition. It just seems to be all sorted out in terms of how they plan to do it. And that was really impressive for me. The carbon price, right? Like they kind of have all the building blocks in place. And I'm surprised because CDR is a nascent space, and I didn't expect from a company I hadn't interacted with before to see such a detailed plan already. And yeah, really remarkable.
And great playbook for others, right, to follow.
Definitely one to follow. And last but not least, an interview I was very much looking forward to with Adina Braha-Honciuc, the Global Policy Director for Climate and Environment and Carbon Dioxide Removal Lead at Schneider Electric. And Schneider Electric had made news literally, I think, the week or 2 weeks before the conference with their first big purchase of durable carbon removal. And Adina is a CDR veteran. She's been working in CDR before going to Schneider Electric. So I was really curious to hear her perspective as somebody who's kind of switched sides.
Thanks, Adina, for being with us. And
thank you for having me.
You made waves with Schneider Electric recently for being one of the, let's say, a large new buyer in the space with your 31,000 ton offtake from Climeworks. And we wanted to dig into a little bit what brought you to that? So maybe first, how is it? Like, what makes CDR purchases feasible or difficult within a company like Schneider Electric?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. I think for Schneider Electric, it's always been the science. We have been driven by science, and we know what guides our commitments. So it's the deep reductions and utilizing our residual emissions with high quality carbon removals. And we really want to be a role model in how we reach these commitments. So at Schneider, we have been one of the first companies to have validated targets against the corporate net zero standard from SBTi, the version 1, back in 2021. And as you know, that's a really long-term target. That's 2050. And what Schneider has done at that time was kind of to think, how do we build some intermediary milestones to help us get there? We know that by 2050, we have to reduce emissions by 90% and neutralize residual emissions across the whole value chain. So we thought, okay, by 2030, why don't we focus on our scope 1 and 2 emissions while we are obviously trying to reduce scope 3 emissions as well. And we built in this net zero operational target. We call it net zero ready. So that's 90% reduction in scope 1 and 2 and neutralization of the final 10% residual emissions with removals. And that really gave us an incentive to really work towards a clear near-term target and build towards that. So at Schneider, we've been investing for a long time in nature-based solutions, and this deal with Climeworks is really a first step to diversify that portfolio, to work on some of the high durability building blocks we want to sort of build into our broader portfolio. So it's a small step. It's a pilot towards that diversification, towards increasing the durability of the portfolio we want to see in 2030. And also it provides us the opportunity to build these early relationships with suppliers in the technology space. And that's maybe a unique perspective for Schneider. I think we are in a unique place with our business model. We're a technology company in the energy space, energy management, industrial automation. And we really want to explore how can we be part of the innovation story for this growing market. So for us, it's really, we see that as a dual business case, as kind of dual value creation. Obviously, we want to secure the demand we need for 2030. We want to scale the market. But in addition, we want to explore how can we be part of the innovation story of these industries. So with Climeworks, we're also exploring these technology innovation opportunities, and we're hoping to do the same going forward with any new partnerships that we would be looking to.
Maybe on that kind of dual model that you're describing, what does that mean for how you look at potential suppliers of carbon removals?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we are looking at suppliers that are sort of close to our business in terms of our ability to support them and to support their energy efficiency, to support with their plant equipment, to support with their automation, for example, and really to explore how we can get to lowering the cost curve for that particular technology, so that it becomes commercially viable, that we bring the cost down, and really it becomes something that is a technology that everyone can invest in, can purchase, can afford. And to me, I mean, we've seen the pioneers, the buyers that have really just made such an important step in creating those demand signals that we need to kind of really start building. But I think leadership also means building a market that everyone can join. And as a company, we're kind of, and I think every company should ask, what is my role? What is my unique value proposition with where I'm standing, my place in the industry, my kind of unique skills, capabilities on the market. How can I build something that is important for the industry? And I think for us, our unique capability is also to look at how our technology can support in that space, so that we make it easier for others to join this market in the future.
Yeah. And if I may ask you, I mean, you joined Schneider Electric, what, a year and a half ago?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Almost
in
2 years
December.
ago. Yes. And you were telling me that, durable removals was not something that people were very familiar with before, right? So how did you create that buy-in?
Yeah, I think Schneider has been focused a lot on carbon reduction and doing amazing things in that space. We have invested for a long time in nature-based solutions such as the Livelihood Fund. It goes, I think, for the next 25 years. So we really just explored together what are the pieces of carbon removal that we still need in our portfolio. So it was just bringing that part of the conversation in front of the leadership. Obviously, at Schneider Electric, our residual emissions are fossil fuel emissions. So increasing the durability of our portfolio was essential, so that by 2050 as well, we can really aim towards a durable net zero target. And we know, not just for Schneider Electric, but science tells us that we can and it's important to invest in nature-based solutions and in carbon removals, and we will continue to do that. But there's also a capacity limit that we will reach at some point on nature-based solutions. And we know that we need to build a market for technology solutions that could fill that gap. Therefore, again, I think it goes back to the leadership that we want to play in that space, and the fact that we want to prepare our steps for that future.
And I mean, I know you from your previous role, right? You were at Microsoft, the market leader for corporate purchases in CDR, but also you're working on policy at Microsoft. So you're a policy geek like myself. And so I'm really interested. What do you think, given that you have the experience in policy, you have the experience in the corporate, what do you need to see from governments around the world in your current role to help you drive more corporate purchases in CDR?
Yeah, great question. I think regulations are so important. I think in the long term, this market needs to be built on clear market infrastructure, driven and founded in clear regulatory rules. And we've seen a lot of progress in this space. I mean, we've both been around at the beginnings and throughout the development of the certification framework for carbon removals. I think that's already amazing progress to have like a baseline for what high quality means for certain technologies. I think there's still a lot of work they need to build to kind of look at the diversity of technologies that can be certified with that particular kind of baseline of integrity. Then I think what's really important is to really clarify the rules around the use of carbon removals in corporate claims, in companies' commitments, and really build that use case for companies. So regulations around claims, Green Claims Directive, or other types of ways that build that credibility in terms of how we are using carbon removals. That will be really, really important. And then I'm really excited about compliance markets and the integration of CDR in compliance markets. To me, that's sort of almost like a letter from the future. I think it tells us a lot about what to expect and about that convergence between compliance and voluntary markets. And we should read that letter and really kind of be curious about how that's going to happen, because I think there's just so much opportunity, and not just for let's say ETS companies or for suppliers that will be able to benefit from that new demand, but also for companies that have suppliers in the ETS system, customers in the ETS system. I think there's an opportunity to kind of explore how does this whole value chain can contribute to increasing demand in CDR. And we talked about policy, and I think there's a really interesting interaction between policy and standards and voluntary standards. Again, at some point they will converge. But in terms of demand, I think what we would really love to see, what would be helpful, is that idea of guidance around how do we build the journey towards 2050 net zero. How, we do have more guidance and understanding of the fact that we need to plan from a reduction perspective. We need to plan our steps. We don't get to 2030 or 2050 overnight. So on the reduction side, I think there's already a lot of work and understanding about how to do that. I think removal needs to get to the same place.
Yeah.
And just understanding what are the milestones, how do we build on that? I think these are questions that always come up in leadership conversations, and whether you're a sophisticated, let's say, company in terms of expertise on carbon removals or not, I think either way, it's very helpful to see, what does good look like in terms of the scientific milestones that will get us there. So I think in that space, SBTi has a big role to play, an opportunity. I'm excited to see whether, the version 2 of the standard will bring that needed clarity on the milestones.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adina.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sebastian. Glad to be here.
What really came out in the interview, and also in conversations I had with Adina over the course of the 2 days, is how important it is to have an internal champion within a company. Because she came into Schneider Electric, a company that is very tech focused, right? But that historically had very much been on the nature removals and nature solutions side. And she had to do a lot of legwork to get people to embrace these synergies with the durable removals sector. But yeah, I found it fascinating to see just how important having that individual champion in a company as big as Schneider can be to make something like this happen.
Yeah, and also a very clear narrative. Like the fact that residual emissions in Schneider Electric are fossil fuel emissions, and they are aiming for a durable net zero target. So they want to rely more on durable CDR. Important. Also, the fact that they just want to be part of innovation. I think that doesn't often come up in these conversations. So yeah, having someone with a very strong track record in the space who was able to advocate within their own organization can have such a big impact.
How do you feel? Because one thing that she said on this innovation, I've heard this from a few buyers now, that they're increasingly looking to partner, to buy credits from companies where they're not just buying credits, where they're potentially also becoming a technology partner further down the line, which makes the whole case much more compelling. It's how some of my conversations with buyers in Germany, for example, are playing out. But it's kind of also quite limiting in some ways, I think, right? Because for many buyers, there might not be that immediate obvious fit when it comes to technology partnership. So yeah, I'm wondering, what do you think? Is this the direction? Do you think that especially companies that are tech heavy will more and more try to find these synergies?
I think those who have the bandwidth and interest will definitely double down on this, and others where it's complicated or there are other reasons why it's not going to resonate, they will do it the usual way. But it's definitely something that I see getting more and more traction.
So did we find the answer to how we're going to unlock the next wave of demand, the next wave of buyers? I'm not sure we have a clear yes, but we definitely have a good indication. One thing that to me keeps standing out, both in these interviews and also in other scoops that we've done, like the one with Robert also yesterday on the Buyers Club, is corporates are looking for a why. They're looking for the use case. They're looking for clarity on claims. And more than anything, that's holding people back. That came out in almost all the interviews we did, right? Is when we asked them, what policy do you need? People are usually saying claims, like we need guidance here. Otherwise, we don't know what we're claiming against, right? And so, yeah, curious what your take is. But for me, that's really the one key takeaway is we need more clarity on claims. Otherwise, buyers won't feel comfortable to move.
Yeah, I fully agree. That is the big takeaway. But I loved how all these buyers or investors brought in like different nuance, different angles, which I think is going to be helpful also for policymakers to understand, because everyone wants there to be more buyers for CDR. But then we need to figure out how are we actually going to create these conditions that there is the will to buy, that there is the motivation to do that. It's not simple, but hopefully there is a lot of food for thought here. And it's definitely a topic that we will want to revisit, because there was so much interesting elements coming out from these interviews, and there are more buyers out there than those that we interviewed for this episode. So I'm really keen on following up on this.
So yeah, for us, this was a lot of fun to make. I'm sure we're going to repeat this in the future. For you all out listening to this episode, let us know what you think. Reach out. We'd love to hear if you enjoyed this format, if you'd like to hear more of these formats in the future. And yeah, thanks Eve for tag teaming on this. And I hope to do more live shows with you in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. This is great.